Week 4 is in the books. So that means it's time to hit those waiver wires to find players that could add value to the back end of your rosters. And quick note, I am going to be referencing rostership percentages in this video, and those are coming from roster data from 1,700 Dynasty leagues on myfantasyleague.com. Basically like a 50-50 split of one quarterback in Superflex, all with a minimum of 20-man rosters. So I'm not pulling these players out of nowhere, but it is possible that some or even all of these guys are already rostered in your leagues. But for the most part out there, there are hundreds of leagues where these guys are on waiver wires right now. First and foremost, I want to highlight a couple of players that are very highly rostered, but they're not exactly 100% rostered that I think need to be. And that includes Aiden O'Connell, quarterback for the Vegas Raiders, Deuce Vaughn, running back for the Dallas Cowboys, Michael Wilson, wide receiver for the Arizona Cardinals, Tyler Boyd, wide receiver for the Cincinnati Bengals, Terrace Marshall, wide receiver for the Carolina Panthers, Logan Thomas, tight end for the Washington Commanders, and Cade Otton, tight end for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Again, all guys that are rostered in over 95% of Dynasty leagues out there, but not exactly 100%. So double check your waiver wires and immediately add these guys if they are available. All right, now after listing off a handful of backup quarterbacks to add in last week's video who could get thrown into games because of their struggling starters ahead of them, I did not have Bailey Zappe on that list. And to be honest, I still don't really even know that Mac Jones being benched for Bailey Zappe was truly because Mac Jones was bad. I mean, he was bad, but it was the Dallas Cowboys defense, and the game was really out of hand. So it just made sense to bench your starter and give your backup some more reps in a real game situation. So while this may not change anything for Mac Jones or Bailey Zappe moving forward, we've at least seen now that Bill Belichick is willing to make that switch almost at a moment's notice when Mac Jones is struggling. So it's not unlikely that it could happen again later this season, but as a permanent change. So Bailey Zappe is now added to the list of backups to roster with other names like Jake Browning, Jacoby Brissett, Taylor Heineke, maybe a couple other names out there, but add Bailey Zappe if he is available in your Superflex league specifically. Moving on to another quarterback, recommending to add Mitch Trubisky is really gross because I can't honestly say if he's a better quarterback than Kenny Pickett, and Kenny Pickett is really bad. Or at the minimum, this Steelers offensive scheme for Matt Canada is really, really bad. So if Pickett misses time with the knee injury that forced him to leave the game early, Mitch Trubisky would be the starter by technicality, but does that mean when Trubisky isn't as good as Pickett and Pickett has been terrible for fantasy, does that mean that we're really going to get anything out of Mitch Trubisky? Probably not. But your hope here is just add Mitch Trubisky if he's on your waiver wire in Superflex leagues, and then just immediately flip him for a 4th rounder to someone who needs a quarterback. Continuing with more injury news, Javonte Williams left the game early with a hip injury, and in his place, Jaleel McLaughlin actually led the backfield in rush attempts and targets, totaling 104 yards and a touchdown on 10 total touches. And fun fact, Jaleel McLaughlin is actually college football's all-time leading rusher. He totaled over 8,000 rushing yards and 79 touchdowns over 5 seasons in college, but all at small schools, of course, a couple years in Division II, and then 3 years at Youngstown State. But McLaughlin is a fun dude to watch, and I do think that he would be more of the guy in the Broncos backfield than Samaje Perine in any games that Javonte were to miss. And I think that he is certainly a must-add player this week, if not maybe the biggest add on Dynasty waivers this week in Week 5. Mike Evans also left the game early with a hamstring injury, and in his stead, Deven Thompkins caught 4 passes for 45 yards and a touchdown, plus also added an 11-yard rush as well. And we know how detrimental that hamstring injuries can be, especially to these older wide receivers like Keenan Allen last year, Cooper Kupp right now. So if this injury is serious for Mike Evans, this could be at minimum a multi-week, if not even a multi-month absence. With all that said though, I'm not sure that Deven Thompkins will become an every week fantasy starter just because Mike Evans is missing time and he's the new Buccaneers wide receiver 2. He might not even be the new Buccaneers wide receiver 2. This game could have just been the best game of his entire career. But I think if you have an extra roster spot available just out there because you have guys on IR or whatever, and you can get Deven Thompkins for free off waivers, why not? Trey Palmer is another wide receiver on the Buccaneers that also becomes an interesting name if Mike Evans is out for multiple weeks, but he is already rostered in a ton of leagues and most likely isn't on your waiver wire if you're in an active enough or deep enough Dynasty league. But after becoming a hot name in the preseason, he's had a very minimal role in the Bucs offense to start, so maybe he was dropped over the past 3 or 4 weeks because he didn't really do all that much after being a hot name in the preseason. And that could change due to his speed and his decent size with Mike Evans out. Maybe he becomes the new wide receiver 2 across from Chris Godwin. So if he is available, I would be scooping him up as well too. The Buccaneers do have a bye this week, just to note, so this all could be for naught if Evans is back after a week off for the entire team, but just a couple names to monitor on waivers this week at the wide receiver position. And then lastly, I don't know if anyone out there actually knows this and has been paying attention to what's been going on in Atlanta, but Jonnu Smith is averaging 7 targets a game over the last 3 weeks, which means in this Falcons offense, that basically means he's the top target for Desmond Ridder. But actually though, Jonnu Smith, 20 targets over the last 3 games, and is averaging 11 PPR points per game without scoring a touchdown in that stretch. He has caught either 4 receptions or 40 yards in those 3 games. Kind of broke out on Sunday in London with 6 receptions for 95 yards. And we are honestly at the point where Jonnu Smith might be an every week starter at the tight end position and should be treated closer to guys like David Njoku, Jake Ferguson, Pat Freiermuth, Dalton Kincaid, even Kyle Pitts, honestly, in terms of their weekly viability in your lineup for this season. It's wild that we're at this point in this season, but we are. And the fact that he's only rostered in less than 70% of Dynasty leagues is insane given the production that he's had recently as Atlanta's tight end 1. All right, but if you're into Dynasty Fantasy Football and you're not subscribed to this channel, please do so, as we're going to be dropping Dynasty-specific content all season long. And if you're looking for some players to trade for in Dynasty, I highly recommend checking out Justin's video right up here.